ये कौन लोग हैं? फैजान, लतीफ, रेहान, तलहा, सैफ और डायरेक्ट आ सकते हैं हम। हेलो फराज। हेलो फराज, आवाज आ रही है? आवाज आ रही है? हेलो फराज।
अब मेरी स्पीच घूमना हो जाए।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम मैडम।
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम। कैन यू हेयर मी?
एम आई ऑडिबल टू यू? आपकी आवाज मुझे नहीं आ रही।
देखा नहीं आ रही। जी कैन यू हेयर मी नाउ?
यस यस, आई कैन हियर यू परफेक्ट।
Good. Let me actually put up the volume. How is it now?
Thanks for
Am I clear
joining. No, it's still distorting. Maybe
Distorted.
connectivity issue, maybe.
So just give me a minute. I have this IT colleague who is trying to fit it.
Sure,
एक
sure. We
second
have
दे।
10 minutes. We have 10 minutes. We have sufficient time.
How do you do it? So just like to test again, Ji, am I audible now? Is it clear? Am I audible now? Is it clear now, my voice?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Fine, thank you.
मैंने तो नहीं देखा, मैंने जब आपने कहा कि पिछला उठाओ, मैंने उठा दिया। उसको तो मेरा दिमाग घुमा हुआ है।
तो सर वो कर रहे हैं, क्या कर गया था? उस पे कंप्लीट होती साइन किससे करवाना है? लेना जहाँ पे कल आपने एक्टिव कर लेना, मुझे तो मैंने कल भूला नहीं अनइस्लाम से
डायरेक्टर लिखा हुआ किसी पर,
बार मुझे आपने खुद एक्टिवली आगे होके ना कर लेना।
मैंने तो नर्स में भी डायरेक्टर ही लिखा, क्योंकि
इनके साथ दिखा के कल दिलवा के साइन करिए आप क्या करते हैं ना, हम इसके द्वारा भी टाइप कर लेते हैं। नहीं तो कल आप मुझे पीछे पड़ जाए।
बल्कि कल परसों वो आया था आपने मेरे पास, कहा ये साइन कौन करेगा, मैंने बोला उन्होंने लिखा है वही करो।
हाँ, इसकी हमारी कोई जिम्मेदारी नहीं।
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Usman Saab. Am I audible to you?
जी वालेकुम सलाम जी, आप ऑडिबल हैं।
ठीक है, परफेक्ट। हम बस इफ्तिखार साहब का वेट कर रहे हैं। इसके अलावा हमारे तमाम स्पीकर ने ज्वाइन कर लिया है। काशिफ अली साहब हैं, मैडम मुसरत ने भी ज्वाइन कर लिया है, मैडम किंजा ने भी कर लिया है और खौला साहिबा ने भी कर लिया है। तो बस इफ्तिखार साहब जैसे ही ज्वाइन करते हैं तो हम इसको स्टार्ट करते हैं।
जी ठीक है।
उस्मान साहब, मेरा ख्याल है हम शुरू कर देते हैं, फिर इफ्तिखार साहब जैसे ही ज्वाइन करेंगे तो फिर उनसे बातचीत होगी। तो फराज, आर वी लाइव ऑन फेसबुक? जी, फराज की तरफ से गो अहेड।
जी ठीक है। Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all the listeners who have joined this session today. Today's session is a webinar on advancing corporate integrity, topic with aligning internal grievance redress mechanism with the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights and Global Management. It is a privilege for me to moderate this important discussion with such a distinguished panel representing government, industry, research, and civil society. In Pakistan, this conversation is especially timely as organizations face rising expectations from regulators, investors, employees, the wider public, and there is a growing need to move from policy commitments to real implementation. Aligning internal mechanisms with the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights while learning from global practices is a meaningful step in that. Those of you who were with me in one of the previous webinars that we held with Transparency International, one of the topics that I particularly raised when I was the participant and not the moderator, one of the points that I raised was about the National Action Plan. Now, a lot of people, when you talk about National Action Plan in Pakistan, think about National Action Plan as if, it is to do with security or terrorism. However, if you look into the National Action Plan deeply, there are a lot more elements attached to it than just security or terrorism. That's why today we are joined by an excellent panel of speakers who bring diverse perspectives. And I would start with brief introductions. To begin with, we have Madam Musarat Jabin, who is the Executive Director with SECP. Madam has been able to join quite a few webinars with us for over a year and a half, that we've organized either with Transparency International or ESG Nexus. Madam has been conferred with the prestigious Khatoon-e-Pakistan Award by the Prime Minister of Pakistan on International Women's Day in 2024. Followed by that, we have Madam Fawla Batul, who is Deputy Director in the Ministry of Human Rights in Pakistan. Madam is working as the Deputy Director in the Ministry of Human Rights with over 14 years of experience. She holds MA in Human Rights Policy and Practice. Followed by that, we have Kashif Ali Sahab, who does not require much introduction. You know, those of you who've been part of our previous webinars, he's a regular contributor to our webinars. He's a policy analyst and a governance expert, currently working as the Executive Director in Transparency International. Then we have Iftikhar Ahmed Saab, who is a member expert team for drafting Punjab and Sindh labor codes, comparative labor law expert, founder Center of Labor Research. And then we have Madam Kinza Ejaz, working for Chotani Industries. Madam Kinza is an accomplished sustainability and ethical fashion leader, currently serving as ethical fashion denim, a communication lead and sustainability initiatives manager at Chotani Industries since 2021. So that's the brief introduction about the webinar that we are conducting today, and also brief backgrounds on all the speakers. So welcome all. I would request Madam Musarrat Jabin, Executive Director from SCCP, to deliver the keynote for this session. So over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Usman, and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It is definitely a pleasure to be part of this webinar, and all these webinars, seminars, if as long as they have the right audience, as long as the topic is very relevant, the SCCP is always willing to partake. So at the outset, let me commend the Transparency International and of course the ESG Nexus as well for bringing together such a diverse group of stakeholders, I would say. And as you rightly said, Usman, it's the topic itself is timely and critical. So the focus of today's discussion on advancing corporate integrity and strengthening grievance redressal mechanism goes to the very core, I would say, to the very core of how businesses operate responsibly and how they are actually held accountable, which is the most important part of it. And of course, also how they build the trust with the society. So the SCCP, we have been actively pursuing a comprehensive reform agenda at strengthening the corporate governance and enhancing the overall the integrity of Pakistan's corporate sector. So our approach has been guided by the understanding that strong governance framework are not an end in themselves, but rather the means to ensure transparency and, as I said earlier, also accountability and responsible conduct in business operations. So over past many years now, the SCCP had undertaken a number of reform initiatives, and we have strengthened the code of corporate governance that is applicable to the listed companies, through the Pakistan Stock Exchange. In fact, placing greater emphasis on boards' independence, diversity, including female representation, and enhanced oversight responsibilities of the directors as well. So these reforms are intended to ensure that the boards are not only, kind of a compliance structures, but the effective stewards of corporate integrity and long-term value creation, because that's what sustainability teaches us. In parallel, I would say that we have also introduced the ESG-related disclosure requirements through the ESG disclosure guidelines. We have further amended these guidelines very recently in December last year, 2025, to align them with the Pakistan Green Taxonomy. So while these disclosures actually initially aimed at increasing transparency, I would say, around environmental, social and governance risks, they have also served as an important stepping stone towards a broader conversation on responsible business conduct. So we have encouraged companies to move, just beyond that check the box compliance and tick the box exercise kind of, and move towards more meaningful disclosures that reflect how risks are being managed and how decisions are basically being made. So that's absolutely important. And the SCCP has also been promoting integrated and sustainable reporting frameworks aligned with international standards. And as you know, we have in parallel also introduced the phased implementation of IFRS S1 and S2. And this is part of the broader efforts to ensure that Pakistani companies are not only I would say competitive globally in global markets, but also aligned with evolving international expectations around transparency and accountability. So, and in addition, of course, the SCCP has issued guidelines on corporate social responsibility. These were issued way back, and yeah, it's just not the corporate social responsibility; it's actually responsible business practices. And these guidelines also reinforce the importance of ethical conduct, stakeholder engagement, I would say, and long-term sustainability. So these initiatives collectively aim to embed, a culture of responsibility within the corporate sector, and basically one that goes beyond just regulatory compliance and is grounded in the values of integrity and accountability. That's how I would put it. So from an enforcement and facilitation standpoint, because we always consider SCCP just not as a regulator, you see, to just enforcing those regulations, but also as a facilitator for the capital market. So SCCP has made significant strides to facilitate the market growth as well, and we have strengthened the digitalization through the e-portal system when corporate filings and enhanced risk-based supervision and also improved monitoring of non-financial disclosures is concerned. So all of this is made digital and is risk-based now. Also, these measures are designed to reduce regulatory arbitrage, and I'm sure you would agree with that. To improve ease of doing business and ensure that transparency is just not kind of an aspiration, but also an operational reality, which is absolutely critical. So while these reforms have laid I would say a strong foundation, our focus is also increasing, evolving towards deeper and more fundamental objectives, which is kind of the topic of the day as well, that is the advancement of corporate integrity and the integration of human rights considerations into business practices. So, and in this regard, Pakistan's the National Action Plan, as also Usman mentioned, on business and human rights, that provides actually a critical policy framework. It reflects the country's commitment toward implementing, the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, and also sets out, clear expectations for both the state and businesses in ensuring the respect for human rights. And I think my colleague from the Human Rights Ministry will be speaking on more on that. So, a central pillar, I would say, of this framework is the establishment of effective grievance redressal mechanism. So, these mechanisms actually play a vital role enabling individuals and communities to raise concerns, to seek remedies, to hold organizations accountable, but just not beyond their functional roles. Grievance mechanisms are also increasingly being recognized as key indicator of an organization's commitment towards integrity. And SCCP, I mean, we definitely view grievance redressal mechanisms not in isolated tools or procedural requirements, but as an integral component of corporate governance systems. So when designed effectively, obviously these provide companies with early warning signals. They help identify systemic risk and also enable timely and credible responses to stakeholders' concerns. However, the effectiveness of these mechanisms really depends on the alignment with international benchmarks, particularly, as I mentioned, the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. So this requires all that the grievance mechanism are not just just made available, but also legitimately, and they are effectively and predictably and I would say equitably implemented, and they are transparent and are I would say are right compatible. Because then they, it's basically that, it's for all, it's just not for a group of, stakeholders. So this is, where the challenge lies. Actually, in many organizations, we have seen that, they have formal mechanism in place, but their effectiveness is often, very limited, and, they lack by accessibility. As I said earlier, the trust aspect of it, the integration into the decision-making process. So, I think, therefore, the focus must shift from mere existence to functionality and credibility. And I think this is what also, Usman, you referred to in your beginning remarks. So another important actually dimension in this discussion in human rights due diligence, which is very critical, and I would say it's an important part just attached with it, because increasingly businesses are expected to proactively identify, assess, and address human rights risks associated with their operations, with their supply chains, and with their business relationships. This actually represents a shift from reactive approaches to more structured and forward-looking risk management. And in practical terms, actually, this means that human rights, human rights considerations as such, by extension, actually, is the grievance redressal mechanism. They cannot remain confined to CSR departments or compliance unit within organizations. They must be embedded within the core governance structures. And I would say with more clear, board level kind of, oversight and integration, integration basically into the policy of, the departments and, the organizations. So they must ensure that appropriate policies, processes, and accountability mechanisms are in place. On the reporting side, we are also witnessing a gradual and, but we would say, important shift, which is stakeholders are increasingly demanding more meaningful disclosures, and this is what the SCCP is ensuring. Moving beyond just general policy statements to detailed explanations of how risks are identified, what actions are taken, and what outcomes are basically achieved. So the level of transparency is essential for building trust and demonstrating accountability. And if I have to just shorten my thoughts, we, as looking ahead, I think the stakeholders, all of the stakeholders, they need to work together to advance this agenda, and efforts should basically be, as a regulator, of course, our efforts are on strengthening the disclosure aspects, the ESG disclosure requirements, and also with a move to more standardized and possible assurance reporting. Also in ensuring that the board's accountability for sustainability and human rights risks, because now it's time for our corporate sectors to basically understand and absorb all of this. In addition, I would say promoting capacity building for companies on implementing effective grievance redressal mechanism, and of course the due diligence framework. And fostering greater collaboration with the stakeholders is essential, including the civil society, the international partners, to align Pakistan's corporate sector with the global benchmarks. So grievance redressal, I would say they are critical instruments for early risk detection, stakeholders trust building, and also for continuous improvement. And strong, obviously, grievance redressal mechanism can help companies identify the gaps, and they can also then, once they identify, they are in a position to respond to those concerns and, operationalize their commitments to a responsible business conduct. And I'm very hopeful, inshallah, in today's discussions. I think it is, this topic being highly relevant, it provides an opportunity to bridge the policy framework, as Usman you said earlier, with the practical implementation, and to collectively explore how we can strengthen the corporate accountability in Pakistan. And I definitely look forward to the insights that will emerge from this session, and to continued collaboration in advancing the corporate integrity and responsible business practices, because ultimately, you see, the objective is to ensure that corporate integrity is not seen just as an abstract kind of a concept, but as a practical measurable outcome. And I hope that post this session we are going to have some kind of recommendations, and if not a white paper, but some kind of recommendations to move ahead with this agenda, because I'm very confident that the insights shared today will, inshallah ta'ala, will contribute meaningfully to this efforts, and will help shaping a more I would say robust kind of and credible framework for grievance redressal and corporate integrity in Pakistan. So I just look forward to an engaging discussion, and to continue collaborating in advancing responsible business conduct in the country. So thank you once again, and wish you all the best.
Madam, thank you very much for the opening remarks, and thank you for joining our session once again. I am personally, a huge fan of the work that you and the SCCP and your team are collaboratively doing in relation to promoting ESG and looking at the National Action Plan, followed by, like you mentioned, the implementation of S1, S2, publication of ESG guidelines. I mean, there is so much happening, I mean, like I said, these are my own personal thoughts that, what has happened, I personally think, in the last year and a half that SCCP has delivered, is humongous, in 360 degree angle, in terms of where ESG compliance, ESG auditing, and so on and so forth is concerned. But like you rightly said, that, we now need to move from just gupshup and having a cup of tea over a policy discussion to actual implementation. There is so much guidance and relevance available from SCCP that now is the time that businesses, organizations move from towards implementation. I mean, a lot of when we are doing discussions, trainings, I am asked a question, particularly in terms of the regulator, and I have nothing but complimentary things to say about what SCCP has done. So, Madam, thank you very much. Thank you to your team and the vision that that is behind the whole SCCP implementation. Thank you for joining this. And on that, I will move on to my next participant, which is Kashif Ali Saab. Kashif Ali Saab, welcome to this session. Participants, like I said to you in the beginning, that Kashif Saab requires no introduction. He's been a regular participant of our webinars that we've conducted. So Kashif Saab, thank you for joining and welcome. So my question to you would be that how does government envision on ensuring implementation of action points related to access to remedy the National Action Plan and BHR? So what would your thoughts be on that, please?
No, thank you. Thank you, Usman Saab. Let me start by also, I think, thanking the SSCP and Madam Musar Saiba for joining and also laying out the vision. For your question, I feel like the more pertinent person to answer this would be Madam Khola, because she is also with us, and she could perhaps, I think, talk in detail about what is the vision of the MOHR behind this, and then maybe I can come in and talk a bit about what some of the data shows. So if Madam Khola is fine with it, maybe because you're talking about the government, so and Ministry of Human Rights is with us, and then.
Thank you, Kashif. Am I audible?
Yes, madam. Yes.
As you know, that government of Pakistan is implementing this National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights since December 2021. It's a unique document in the sense that all the relevant stakeholders at federal level had given assent, and it does have endorsement of all the federal cabinet members. And then we also involved provincial governments as well. So we tried to make it very inclusive, and access to remedy is one of the main priority areas, as it has 8 priority areas. And so if you look at the spirit of this National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, as a Human Rights Ministry, we had on inclusion and protection of vulnerable groups. For instance, women, children, and transgender persons and persons with disabilities. So the protection of the vulnerable group is running throughout this action plan, and access to remedy. The action points specifically stipulated in access to remedy focus on the special protection for these groups. What we have been doing is that we have been approaching institutions like National Commission for Human Rights, and it's sensitizing them about their role, and also they're approaching us that with particular, information about that, what sort of complaints they are getting from the from the workers and employers, and how are they proceeding about it. And they do have some inquiry and fact-finding reports which are available at their websites. I'm sure that there is one on the situation of mine workers in Balochistan. So what we have been doing is that we have been working in collaboration with all the stakeholders at federal and provincial level, and also the private sector. I'm sure that I have talked about it, but I want to stress it again that our steering committee, which is headed by Minister for Human Rights, includes representation from Overseas Employment Chamber, and then FPCCI, and also workers and employers representatives. So it is. So the spirit is to make it like more inclusive and to gauge that how we have been doing so well and doing at the moment, and how we can improve it gradually. I would say that on legislative front, we have done a lot of work, but access to remedy is something which we are still sort of, analyzing and trying to gauge that how can we improve further in this area. So what we have done recently is that we have also launched, with the help of UNDP Pakistan, we are conducting studies, fact-finding and basic, studies, just to understand that how access to remedy is being limited under NAB-DHR to all the stakeholders, and then also with a special focus on inclusion of women, and then what can be, like, once we have these studies, which will be completed by the end of this year, we'll have those recommendations, and which we can share with all the stakeholders again, that how to ensure, their inclusion and take right steps. And also we have been in touch with offices like ombudsmen, because they are providing remedy right at the door. So that is how we have been ensuring its implementation. And I mean that it's a gradual, of course, process, and it is not very ideal at the moment, but then this is how we are also envisioning that stakeholders, including Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, which is also, by the way, in the member of the steering committee, how they can be involved. And then as a part of our recent initiative, which is introducing a human rights due diligence roadmap, which strictly stipulates, actions for public sector entities, and also a human rights due diligence checklist, which includes guidelines which are voluntary nature at the moment, but we are eyeing that they can become like sort of mandatory in the future. So this is how we are engaging regulators and all the stakeholders. So it is an inclusive process, and it is slow at the moment, but I think that with time and with effort and with all the awareness raising and with webinars like this, we'll be able to achieve fruitful results in future. Thank you.
Madam, thank you for highlighting this particular issue and the efforts that the ministry is making. It's really commendable, and it's heartening to see how all various different stakeholders are coming together and putting effort towards this cause. So on that, I will now move on to Kashif Saab. Kashif Saab, from an integrity and anti-corruption perspective, what do you think the risks emerge when organizations lack trusted internal reporting system? So if you could shed some light on that, please.
So thank you, Usman Saab. So let me begin, I think, what earlier Ms. Paula said about the National Action Plan, and also share some of the data that we have from our assessment at TI Pakistan. And this assessment, and I think the data would show you currently where we stand. And when I say where we stand, we are talking about the top public listed companies on the stock exchange in Pakistan. So at TI Pakistan, we publish an annual assessment of the public listed companies every year under a global methodology. It's called the Transparency in Corporate Reporting. The last assessment that we did was published last year in 2025, and it was an assessment of the top 70 companies. We are currently in process of publishing another assessment, which currently covers around 25% of the listed companies on the stock exchange. But on the overall, I think to your questions, if some of these GRM systems are missing, what would be the risk for the companies? And then the good starting point, I think, would be to look at the key components of the National Action Plan and the key component around the GRM system. Where do we currently stand? And from that point of view, I think if you look at our assessment, we assess that when we look at the top 70 companies, the average score on the integrity systems was only 47.28%. Now, as per the methodology, it was categorized as partially transparent. And the report also identified some of the weaknesses when it comes to internal integrity systems of the companies. So, for example, I would shed light on some of these key points. So we found out that out of the 70 companies, 58 companies that did not disclose having a publicly available policy on prohibiting facilitation payments. Around 59% of the companies that we assessed, they reported having a whistleblowing mechanisms in place, which is a very good and encouraging sign. But at the same time, 86% of these 59 companies, they also lacked a two-way communication channel. Now, जब हम GRM system की बात करते हैं, तो उसमें two-way communication system होना बहुत जरूरी है, because this would then allow the employees to report not only their concerns, but also get the updates in terms of what is happening on their complaints, whether the actions have been taken, something that Madam Musarrat earlier highlighted, really the functionality of these GRS systems. And then we saw that from a data point of view, these two-way communication channels were missing. We also found that only 52% of the companies had a policy on the gifts, which also included a threshold and procedures on the reporting requirements. Now, from a human rights due diligence perspective and the grievance redressal mechanisms point of view, again, if you look at the overall picture, I would say, unfortunately, it's also not very highly encouraging. So we found out that the average score on the human rights due diligence, when it comes to publicly available information, the score of the top listed companies were only 60.14%. We found out that only 33 companies, they reported having implemented a human rights due diligence processes in their operations. We found out that only 31 companies had a functional grievance redressal mechanisms in place for the employees to report the human rights violations. Now, these findings, I think they do two things. A, they show what are the gaps when it comes to having a functional governance structures in place for employees and stakeholders to raise concerns. But at the same time, it also highlights the risk for organizations not having these strong internal reporting systems. And in terms of the risk, I think broadly some of the research that the TI has done globally, we feel there are three fundamental risks for the companies for not having these functional systems in place. First and foremost, obviously, now, as you also said, the internal reporting requirements, this is more and more becoming a legal obligations for the companies. But at the same time, you also have to think about the effects of not having these systems on the companies. And these effects would really include from legal liability to reputational harms to financial losses. And we have seen that, in more recent times, how many big companies have also suffered some of the biggest corporate scandals. Those also came out because of the weaknesses of these systems. And secondly, I think it's also the question of the legal requirements, because for companies now globally, if you look at particularly the European Union directives, the UK Bribery Act, or the ISO requirements, these now increasingly require companies to have strong GRM systems, strong whistleblowing systems in place. So as a company, if you have a subsidiary that operates in a jurisdiction in European Union or other territories, it's also a legal requirement to have these frameworks in place. And here again, I think the risk is not only legal, but also one of financial and reputational. And thirdly, again, I think from a research point of view, the evidence also suggests that strong grievance redressal, mechanisms, they also make organizations more inclusive and more safer for the organizations. So, for example, when the data highlights that only 31 out of the top 70 companies in Pakistan have systems to report human rights violations, we are leaving a massive door, open for different grievances and violations. So these are, I think, some of the key risks that we have also documented and highlighted from the latest assessment at TI Pakistan. But happy to contribute more on this. Thank you.
Kashif sir, thank you very much on shedding light on this. The viewers, the report that Kashif sir is talking about, I have read that personally when it was published last year. It's a great piece of publication that has come out from Transparency International. And I would request the admin team to share the PDF document in the chat for the participants, so they can read and sort of look at where we stand in relation to these grievance systems. And like Kashif Saab mentioned that, the report clearly states that 31 out of 70 top companies in Pakistan, they are the only ones who have that redress system in place, which obviously, begs two questions, from my perspective. One, those companies which are non-compliant, they are leaving themselves open to, breaches and complaints and so on and so forth. Also, from an employee perspective, if an issue takes place or if an issue happens, then, where do they go? So what is that redressal mechanism, obviously, which is lacking in those businesses. So with that, I will move on to Kinza Ejaz, who has joined us from Chotani Industries. Kinza, welcome to the session. So moving on from, the conversation that we were having, with Kashif Saab. So I would like you to, sort of shed some light on how companies can, with your corporate background and, all the expertise that you have, how can businesses, implement all these policies in place? How can organizations build systems that the employees can genuinely trust, use, and also those systems are accessible to them? So how would, how can we make sure that?
Thank you so much for having me here. It was such a short call. I'll answer best to my ability and to my knowledge. I work for all of you who don't know me. I work as an ethical fashion head at Chotani Industries, and I also work on sustainability and many initiatives, and I'm a communication strategist. So I also build in businesses with a lot of brands. And I work on reporting to UNGC and UN Women. So here, where the actual example is, I would say, in my experience, it would be we are doing this project, which is called Green Project Pakistan, and we are focusing on the CSDDD. CSDDD is the new directive, that's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. What it does is it forces big companies to check human rights, reduce environmental damage, be responsible for their entire supply chain. How I've put it into our part of the ESG and how I think it's internally with the internal grievance mechanism and with the national and the global ESG frameworks, how it bridges. I think when a lot of people or buyers or brands, they talk about ESG in fashion, especially in denim manufacturing, they're basically we're mainly focused on environmental impact, which is like water reduction, chemicals, or circularity. But from my experience, when you work with the buyers and the supply chains, the real question or the real backbone that a lot of people they're asking is how people are treated or how workers are treated. I get like some of the brands that are like asking me questions. Oh, well, what if like there are workers outside, you know, the factory, and I've seen them happening in Bangladesh. The women, their pays get snatched away by their husbands who are like waiting outside because, you know, there's nothing that's gone like digital. So, you know, in order to have like those questions answered with full transparency, and, you know, of course, it's really important for us to lock in business. We have to do like a regular, you know, thematic cultural audit because we get to report this to UN Women and we get to report this to on various other platforms. And I tell you, with all these social compliances or themes that we're working on, like for instance, you know, workplace harassment or psychological safety or wage issues or health safety, gender-based discrimination. And recently I conducted like this awareness on domestic violence. And that too awareness that was given to men rather than women. So when we get like collect all this data, and that's like I get to do like the editorial pieces. So like for instance, if there are brands who are looking into social compliance and they're asking for that piece of information, and Shotani industry gets to be really transparent about this, we tend to lock in a lot of business. So again, the consumers for those fashion brands, they're not only they don't want to be aware mostly about like the environment. They want to be aware mostly about like how the people are being treated in the factories. I hope that answers the questions.
Yes, no, it certainly does. Thank you very much. You know, I mean, obviously, there is a lot happening in the background, you know, in terms of Green Project Pakistan. We have held a lot of discussions, you know, with various within the various different forums on Green Project Pakistan. And obviously there is a lot of movement happening there. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Were you going to say something?
Sorry, Usman. Yeah, I just wanted to add, like with the CSDDD, the human rights due diligence, I think a lot of companies they don't, or the corporates or the textile industries, they're not aware that you know, there's going to be a penalty when it gets actually put into action, when the transparency, full transparency, or the reporting mechanism is not there. So, you know, it's quite a risky situation.
Yes, it certainly is. So thank you very much for that. That takes me to Iftikhar Ahmed Saab. Iftikhar Ahmed Saab has joined this session, who carries a lot of experience in relation to labor law. He is also part of the ESAS program, which is formed by Prime Minister of Pakistan to extend social protection to informal workers. Iftikhar Saab has also authored the Islamic labor law. So carrying on from the conversation that I was having with Madam Kinza, Iftikhar Saab, if I may ask that, you know, what are the most important legal and practical principles, you know, every grievance process or system should include to ensure fairness and transparency in that aspect?
Thank you very much, Usman sir. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to share a bit about myself first. I'm from the Center for Labor Research. I'm the founder of Center for Labor Research. I have been involved in the labor law reforms in the country. I was part of the 3-member court team which drafted the Punjab and Sindh Labor Codes. Punjab Labor Code has already been enacted by Punjab Assembly on 10th of February 2026. And hopefully soon it will become applicable in the sense that government only has now to give a 2-liner notification that this law becomes applicable from this date. And the most important thing from that law is that it also requires human rights due diligence. So we don't have to wait for the CSDDD or CSRD to become effective. As soon as the Punjab Labour Code becomes effective, the companies, at least in Punjab, will have to do human rights due diligence. This is the first thing. I will be sharing my screen. To one moment. Why can't I? Yeah. Okay. So I've been asked to talk about the most important principles for grievance redressal mechanisms. I will be repeating what the UNGP Principle 31 talks about. It talks about 8 benchmarks which are needed for a grievance redressal mechanism to work effectively, and so that the individuals are able to talk about their concerns, their human rights concerns, and the companies are supposed to take certain actions. The first is that a grievance redressal mechanism should be legitimate. What actually it means is that the workers should be able to trust it. If an individual worker, if they know that the complaint that they are filing through the complaint box or through a helpline can be used to take negative action against them, they will not be able to use it. So the first thing is that the individuals who are using those grievance redressal mechanisms, they should be able to think that, yes, if I'm filing a complaint, it is not going to be used against me. This is also a concern not only about the grievance redressal mechanism at the workplace, but also when the workers file complaints with the Labour Department, for example, because their concern is that the Labour inspector will inform the workplace that this worker is filing a complaint against you. Secondly, a grievance redressal mechanism should be accessible. What it means is that, I mean, everyone who is supposed to use it should be able to use it. There should be no language barrier, or there should not be a cost barrier, or there should not be a fear of reprisal. Once again, if there is a helpline and the helpline is available only during the working hours, what we are actually saying is that the person, a worker who is working in a factory from 9 to 6 and the helpline closes at 9 to 5, what it means is that the worker will not be able to file a complaint because they would not want to take the risk of filing the complaint from the workplace during the working hours. Similarly, if there's a cost that you have to bear this cost to make this complaint, obviously they will not be able to do it. And if there is a language barrier, for example, a factory in Karachi, they would have the individual workers from all over Pakistan, and if I can file complaints only in one language, then it means that the grievance redressal mechanism is not accessible at all. The third principle is that the grievance redressal mechanism should be predictable. What it means is that as soon as a worker files a complaint, they should clearly know that it will get a response in a certain time period. Our legislation generally sets timelines, although those timelines are really followed by the companies as well as by the labor courts. But if a grievance redressal mechanism is there, it should always have a timeline, and then those timelines should be given due cover. The fourth principle is that it should be equitable. What it means is that everyone should have equal access to information. Generally, at a workplace, those who are hiring individual workers, they generally have much more legal info with them than a normal worker. So if a company has a GRM at a workplace, it is important that the individual workers are given free advice on how they can file a complaint. And obviously, at the same time, yes, that it should be predictable, and they should very clearly know that no negative action is going to be taken against them. The fifth principle is that the grievance redressal mechanism should be very transparent. What it means is that a person who has filed a complaint should be informed of the progress of their complaint. It should not be a one-way system that, yeah, you filed a complaint and now there's no response from the employer, or if there's a response, if the response is after 6 months. It is really important that as soon as a complaint is filed, a person is informed within a week that their complaint has been received, and then they should be informed that they will get a response within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. But yes, they should be clearly informed of all the progress that is being made. The fifth principle is, or rather, sixth principle is that the grievance redressal mechanism should be rights compatible. What it means is that a company can't offer a remedy while saying that they will not respect certain human rights or labor rights. For example, a worker can't be asked to settle a dispute or a complaint saying, I mean, we can do this for you if you don't join a union, for example, or we can do this for you if you don't do this or that. The grievance redressal mechanism and all the actions taken after that should be rights compatible. They should not violate the workplace rights as have been provided under the UN covenants as well as the conventions of the ILO. The seventh principle is that a grievance redressal mechanism should lead to continuous learning, but the learning should be used to improve the systems. For example, if the company is receiving certain complaints from the workers, and for example, there are complaints about the heat stress in a factory or on a construction site, this should lead to revised working hours, or maybe the rest breaks should be given to the individual workers more. So the most important thing to remember here is that if a grievance redressal mechanism is not leading to improvement in the system, then it means that it is not working effectively. The last principle is that engagement and dialogue. It means that every grievance redressal mechanism should be based on engagement and dialogue with the people who are using it and with the people whose human rights are going to be impacted. So at a workplace, a grievance redressal mechanism should involve individuals as well as their trade unions. For example, if there is a grievance redressal mechanism without the due representation from the shop stewards, from the works council, or from the trade union, or from the collective bargaining agent at the workplace, then it means that it is not compliant with the UNGPs. But at the same time, what I would like to also highlight is that the workplace grievance mechanisms, they are helpful, but then they should not be used to replace the trade unions or the collective bargaining or the labor courts. Obviously, they are helpful in highlighting the issues. They are helpful in dealing with the complaints. But the important thing to remember is that in all our trade union laws that are applicable in the whole country, there is a requirement of a works council, and the works council can play an important role to do the grievance redressal. Similarly, under the Punjab Labour Code, there is a full provision for a grievance redressal committee, which is supposed to look into the complaints about violence and harassment, as well as complaints about
thank you.
discrimination. Yes.
Thank you, Farhad. Thank you for sharing this effectiveness criteria with us. You know, our participants would greatly appreciate if we could share this in the chat as a PDF file for future reference, because you know, it would be helpful as a document, that can be referred to moving forward. Okay, so we are almost nearing the end of this session. So let's go to the chat if we have any questions from the participants for the speakers.
Assalamu alaikum, all participant. Good afternoon. My name is Asfandiar, speaking from Chitral. There is a net problem, so we cannot understand anything.
Okay, I think they have issue with the internet, so they can't hear us very clearly. Any further questions? Okay, so moving on towards the closing of this session. So I have a question for all the speakers that would serve as, sort of a closure from all the speakers. You have sort of a minute or so to go through this, in terms of the response, So what do you think is, I mean, how can the leadership create a workplace culture where speaking up is seen as strength or seen rather than a risk, So if I'm working in an organization, I should be able to say it as is, towards the senior management. So I would open the floor with Madam Musarrat Jabin. Sorry, for Madam Kinza.
Sorry, Usman, it was taking time to open the camera. Yes, I would say that in our practices, apart from, doing our due diligence, we are now channeling towards making everyone ethical leaders and practicing ethical leadership in our corporate so that everyone becomes more responsible for their own actions and they're responsible workers, citizens. And I think that plan is definitely going to work.
Thank you, Madam. Moving on to Madam Kuala from Ministry of Human Resources. So same thing on there that, what do you think that, the environment that, leadership can brew within the organization where if I feel something, I can go up to the management and say it as is?
Since we have been focusing a lot on private sector, so I think that if private business entities start constituting committees like internal equal opportunity committees, and they do generally have a culture of human rights, I think this can be easily achieved, and workers and employers all will be sort of comfortable in speaking their minds.
Thank you. Kashif Saab, your thoughts, please.
To me, I think leadership plays a pivotal role because it's essentially also a question of the organizational culture, and the cultures, they don't develop overnight. It has to be a continuous process. So I think my key takeaway would be that what we need from the leadership in the companies is to demonstrate this commitment in your annual reports by setting a clear tone from the top that support strong systems and that also support preventing any wrongdoing. And now, obviously, that has to be supplemented by putting in place a functional system. But let's start by demonstrating a strong commitment to these, core ideals that we are discussing.
Thank you very much, Kashif Saab. And like you rightly said, behavior breeds behavior, So obviously, to start off with, we will have to take baby steps and then, it will, nurture within the culture of the business. that brings me to Iftikhar Saab. Your thoughts on this as to, what kind of or how the leadership can, sort of pave a way for employees or workers to approach them if they have any issues or concerns.
I think to me, the first step would be to ensure that they ensure that the labor law is complied at the workplace. If they ensure that, for example, as I said, all trade union laws in the country, they talk about establishing works councils. They are a requirement. Trade union at a workplace is not a requirement. Works council is. But the works council can play a very important role in grievance redressal mechanisms, because in all those laws, there is an option for the workers to file a complaint through either a trade union or a works council. So yes, to me, they should try implementing the law as it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iftikhar Saab, and thank you very much for all the participants for their take on how we can make this, how leadership can pave a way for an openness in terms of communication, and also if there are any issues as such. Now, before I move on to the next segment, we have a question here in the chat by Sobia Mir, and the question is, what is the GRM private companies need to comply / follow according to the labor laws of Pakistan? So any takers, speakers on this question? Kashif Saab?
I can respond to it.
Sure, go ahead, Iftikhar Saab, please.
Well, as I said, the labor legislation that is currently applicable requires the establishment of the works councils or the joint management boards at the workplaces. Similarly, under the harassment law, there is a provision for committee. Similarly, under the Punjab Labour Code, there is a provision for a grievance redressal committee. So these are all the grievance redressal mechanisms that are provided under the law, which if complied with properly, can improve the situation on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Iftikhar Saab. Sobi, I hope that answers your question, but if you have a further preceding question to this, you can write in the chat and we'll come back to you after the next segment. Okay, so before we close up, we have Ms. Faria Fatma, who is the Program Associate at Transparency International Pakistan. Faria is working with Transparency International Pakistan, working on transparency and accountability in climate governance, climate finance, public procurement, monitoring, and climate projects. So I would request Madam Faria Fatima to present a closing summary for this session, please. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Usman Saab. Thank you to all. Am I audible? Hopefully, I am audible. Oh, thank you. Thank you to all of our distinguished speakers and to all the participants for their active engagement throughout this webinar on business and human rights. It was really an honor to facilitate such an important dialogue. I would like to thank our respected speakers, Madam Musarra Jabi, Madam Paula Batul, Madam Kinza Ejaz, Mr. Iftikhar Ahmed, Mr. Kashif Ali, and Mr. Usman Masood for this discussion. Today's webinar provided important perspectives on advancing the business and human rights agenda, highlighting the role of government, private sector leadership, and civil society in promoting responsible and rights-based business practices. Our speakers emphasized building a culture of responsibility within the corporate sector, strengthening trust, and shifting focus toward practical implementation and accountability for sustainable outcomes. We also discussed the adaptation of S1 and S2 standards, development of ESG guidelines. From the government's perspective, emphasis was placed on the protection of vulnerable groups and the strengthening of effective grievance redressal mechanism. Kashif Saab also referred to findings from track report highlighting the persistent gaps in transparency and the need to move beyond disclosure toward meaningful implementation of corporate governance and accountability standards. Ms. Kinza highlighted the need for psychological safety in the workplace and addressing workplace harassment to ensure a safe, inclusive, and dignified work environment. Iftikhar Saab highlighted Principle 31 of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, emphasizing the importance of effective grievance mechanisms that are legitimate, accessible, and based on trust to ensure meaningful access to remedy. With this, I conclude the summary of today's discussion and now hand it over to Usman Saab for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Faria, for the summary. I would like to thank all the participants and all the speakers for their input and also the information that they have shared. We've had Madam Musarat Jabin from SCCP, Madam Kuala from Ministry of Human Rights. We've had Kashif Saab from Transparency International, Iftikhar Saab, and then Madam Kinza Ijaz from Chotani Industries. Now, today's session has been very informative in relation to these policies and procedures that we have already in place in most of the organization, or we may have in most of the organization, but they are probably sat there gathering dust. Now, the whole idea behind holding today's webinar was, and getting to know the views of the participants or the speakers was, that we need to move that policy document from it gathering dust to actual document that is there for deliverance. Because until such time, we will continue to have these conversations whereby, the question that I prompted to all the speakers in the end about, if what can the leadership do to ensure that, there is an equal opportunity in terms of asking a question, whether it be a senior manager, whether it's a C-level, whether it's a junior admin person or a worker. They should be able to go up to the senior management and they should be able to have access to that GRM process. Also, another thing that Kashif Saab highlighted, that there are 31 out of 70 top companies in Pakistan who have that GRM system in place. So again, that can be a matter of concern and a pride at the same time. So if you look at it from glass half full and half empty, depending on which part do you consider as optimistic or pessimistic, but 31 companies have that system. But what about the other companies that don't have that system in place? So where do those employees go? So again, that requires a conversation and deep diving into the whole assertion of how this GRM system and how we can have an equal opportunity system for all levels within Pakistan. With that, I thank Transparency International Pakistan, the Ministry of Human Rights, ESG Nexus, and all supporting partners for bringing this platform together. Our goal today, by having this conversation, was not just to discuss the principles of, to discuss these principles. The idea was that let's move from those policies, procedures, principles to actual implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. And we hope to see you in one of our upcoming events and also another webinar. Thank you very much. Madam Faria, you have a question?
Yes, Usman Saab, we need to take a group picture with all the participants.
Sure, over to you. I hope I'm looking handsome in the picture. In the frame, sorry.
So I request all of our participants to please turn your cameras on if you are comfortable. done. We are done. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you in one of our future webinars or sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.